welcome to the July 1st meeting of the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners. We are continuing to do our meetings via Zoom, and we want to welcome any of you who are joining us online or at the Douglas County Courthouse. Just passing on a bit of information regarding how we run these meetings during this time of social distancing. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share the screen with the call. Participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their line when not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have a public comment on an agenda item or under regular public comment, please use the raise your hand function of Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their name and address for the minutes. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The chat function has been disabled, and a recording of this meeting will be available on our website after each meeting. That we will jump into our agenda. We have just one item on our consent agenda. We have two items on our regular agenda, then appointments, public comment, and commissioner and administrative miscellaneous. So I'll start with the consent agenda. Does any member of the commission have an item they'd like removed from the consent agenda?
No.
No. And for those who are new, Sarah tells us if there's someone there at the courthouse hoping to speak with us on an item. So Sarah, is there anybody there who would like us to remove an item from the consent agenda?
We've got no one here to do that. Thank you.
And Jill is our online monitor. Jill, is there anybody online who'd like us to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Nope, not that I see.
Thank you, Jill. I'd accept a motion for item 1 on the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. Thank you. Moving on to our regular agenda item. The first one is from our planning department. It's to consider a conditional use permit, CUP 19-00568, to permit a 51.2 acre expansion of Ham Quarry and a revised reclamation plan at 1258 East 2300 Road and revise various conditions of approval. And we'll welcome Mary Miller to our conversation. Hi, Mary.
Mary Miller, planner. Good evening or good afternoon. And so do you want me to begin my presentation?
I think now would be good. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, can I just want to interject something here at the very beginning that I'm a little, I certainly want to hear the presentation, but I have to say I am a little troubled by the last minute offering of some pretty large documents about 24 hours before this meeting on top of a 300 or over 200 page document to represent this proposal. As well as a public comment from a Eudora citizen that just arrived 20 minutes ago that has some substantial thoughts in it. So I don't know that I'm prepared to take all of that in, especially the last dump of documents yesterday, and feel comfortable assuming there will be action tonight. Do you all share that concern, or am I alone in this?
I do also share your concern. It was a lot of information, and
Yeah, I would agree.
And I know County Counsel John Bullock is also available. I spoke to him earlier today, and he also shared some concerns with being able to have all the material read. Mary, maybe before you start your presentation, could you sort of outline what the options the commission has tonight in terms of if we could defer or table or what those are before you jump into the presentation?
Yes, actually, I'm not that familiar with the county commission's bylaws, so this may be a question for John Bullock. I believe they said that you could have deferred it prior to the meeting if the applicant had agreed, which they did not. And then I believe you could defer it now, but I think if John's available, he could probably give you a much better answer than I can.
Yeah, I think you could defer it if you want. You could hear the presentation if you like, and then defer it, or you could defer it and hear the presentation, at a future meeting, or you could proceed this evening if that's what you're inclined to do. It sounds like there's some concern about trying to do that tonight.
So Commissioner Thelman, do you have a preference on that? Do you want to hear the report tonight? Commissioner Drew says, do you want to hear it, or do you want to push it back?
I'll say, I think, I imagine a lot of people have taken the trouble to be present for this meeting. So I don't mind hearing the presentation. I would like more time to digest the vast documents, and especially what was sent in at a very late date. And I do have some questions, so I guess I would like to be able to ask some questions that would help me think through some things. But I would like the grace to hear the presentation, but to be able to have some time to digest, I guess. And if Michelle, you disagree, I'm happy to.
Well, I do not. I mean, that last email came in, it was after 5:30 last night, and I was in another meeting, and it was this morning before I even saw that it was there. So I would like to have had time to digest all that information. But if we, if they want to go ahead with the presentation, that's fine. It's
I think the presentation might help with some context to the rest of your review of the material. Can you hear me, Nancy? I want to make sure.
It's a little light, yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I think it would be good for us to hear the presentation so you have some context, and if there are questions that we can initially get answered. And you're right, we do have a number of folks that I think are listening in because of this issue. So I think that would be good to go ahead and do that. And then at the end of this, let's just be really clear as to when we want this to be reconsidered. So any folks that are participating in the meeting today would know when they need to be looking for it to be taken up again.
Yeah, I would prefer to hear the presentation since we have folks here. So let's go ahead with that. Sounds like that's where commissioners are. I think for the public, thank you. We want to make sure we do the right thing and have the time to review all the documents. This sometimes happens with planning items. We get them pretty fast. And while it's not an excuse, we've been doing budget hearings for the past 2 days. So we've been diving through a lot of information. So I don't think it's surprising that all of us are feeling maybe hoping we could have a little bit more time on this. So with that, let's hear the presentation, and then I think we would make a motion to defer after we would hear the presentation. So let's do it that way.
Okay, Mary Miller, City County Planner, and I will try to share my screen. Okay, are you seeing my slideshow? Okay, thank you. And so as you mentioned, this is a conditional use permit, an amendment to the Ham Eudora Quarry conditional use permit. They're requesting several things: a 50-acre expansion to the quarry area, some revised conditions, and it will also include a revised reclamation plan due to the changes that are being proposed. So these are the changes that the applicant is requesting. They would like to expand the quarry into a 50-acre parcel to the northwest. We commonly refer to this as the Shelton parcel, since that was the previous owner. They would like to increase the area that can be open and mined from 30 acres to 50 acres. and they would like an increase in their sales hours. And so staff has reviewed these, and staff and the Planning Commission are proposing various other changes to the conditions and restrictions of use. And those are noted in the staff report in attachment A, and I'll touch upon some of those in this presentation. So the property is located southeast of the city of Eudora. It's on the Johnson County line. It is within the 3-mile radius of the city of Eudora. So we sent the application and the plans to the Planning Commission and received their comments, and those were included in your packet. We also notified residents in Johnson County as well as the Johnson County Planning Office, and we did not receive any comments back from them. So this is a picture of the area within the amended CUP. On the east side, this is the current CUP. It contains a stream corridor and a woodland up in the northeast corner. And then you can see the quarried area. And then to the northwest is the parcel that's being requested to be amended, and that would be the Shelton parcel. The Peakfish parcel, which is again named for a previous owner, is the one to the south, and that contains about 71.6 acres. The Nice parcel to the north that's quarried has about 128 acres, and then the Shelton parcel to the northwest is about 50 acres. And so this kind of shows those different parcels a little clearer. So on the Nice parcel, quarrying is prohibited east of the creek, and there is a 100-foot setback from the center line of the creek. Quarrying is nearly complete on this parcel, but however, they did identify additional reserves at a much lower level, and so they are wanting to re-quarry this at a deeper depth. And this would require that larger area to be open and mined from, because when you mine at a deeper depth, you need more area open to create the layers that you would travel to get down to it. And also you need a maneuvering area for your vehicles. It just creates a more safe environment. They are requesting to expand into the Shelton parcel. This perimeter of this would be screened with a 6-foot tall berm. There would be smaller 3-foot tall berms on the interior of that where needed to manage stormwater. And the fencing would be signed as no trespassing, similar to the rest of the quarry. This shows the Peakfish portion of the quarry. This was the original grandfathered quarry that was included in the CUP, and currently it's all been quarried. To the east of that creek, the pink area, to the east, this was approved to be a temporary asphalt plant site with a reclamation plan that was approved a few years ago. They no longer intend to use this as an asphalt site, so they're going to reclaim that this year, and that is shown in the reclamation plan. The portion west of the creek is the operations area. This has the stockpile area, the employee parking, and the scale house. And so this will be one of the last areas of the quarry that will be reclaimed. So this is the reclamation plan for the Peakfish quarry. Basically, they intend to make it a fairly level site when they're done and make it suitable for agricultural or other uses that are allowed in the Ag 1 district. Phase 1 contains the Nice parcel and the eastern portion of the Shelton parcel. It's kind of in between the two creeks. The area that's allowed to be, that would be mined from, is shown in tan. And the green area shows the area east of the creek where quarrying is prohibited. And then this also shows the setbacks. There's a 500-foot setback from residences, and most of this is already covered with the other setbacks, but those red areas are just providing 500 feet from any residence. The pink area is a perimeter setback of 150 feet, and then it also shows the 100-foot setback on the west side of the creek. I'm sorry, the perimeter of the quarry, and then it's also 100 foot on the west side of the creek. One of the requirements and conditions of use is that there's some regulatory floodplain on the west side of the Coleman Creek, and that would need to be shown as a setback area as well to ensure there's no quarrying or stockpiling occurring in the floodplain. And you'll see that's one of the conditions of uses that's in your packet. I believe this is, let me see, I think this is supposed to be phase 2. Well, this is phase 2 of the quarry, which is the western portion of the Shelton parcel. It's about 17 acres. Again, we're showing the 500-foot setback. However, the 150-foot perimeter setback, based on the shape of this parcel, pretty much takes care of that. But they've got the 100-foot setback from the stream, and where they can quarry is the area shown in blue. And as you know, with conditional use permits, we always review these with the review criteria in the zoning regulations, which includes the golden factors. One of the things we look at is what is the zoning and land use, the surrounding zoning and land use. The purplish area is the Ag 1 district. The yellow is the Ag 2, which is smaller transitional agricultural lots. These are all developed with residences. So the predominant use in the area and the predominant zoning is agriculture. This shows the residences that are located surrounding the quarry. And so again, the predominant uses are agriculture, but there are residential uses. So to be compatible with the nearby zoning and land uses, appropriate conditions and restrictions of uses would need to be applied to the quarry. Then we look at the character of the area. This shows in blue is the area that's proposed for this amended CUP. The yellow dots are the residences in the area, and it's very possible that I missed some. There's a little area just north of the quarry, about a half a mile, that I think I missed 2 residences on, but this gives you a general idea of how the residences are located throughout this area. The red outlined area to the west is actually the city limits of Eudora, south of K-10 Highway. And so in this area, we have urban scaled residences, and we also have the Eudora High School. And to the southwest of the quarry, we have a platted rural subdivision. So the character of the area is really a mixed use area, with agriculture being the predominant use, but then we have a mix of urban residential and rural residential uses as well. And once again, to be compatible with the character of the area, proper restrictions and conditions of use will need to be applied. And a principal consideration with many CUPs is the this is the suitability of the property for the uses to which it is restricted. And so in the Ag 1 district, the uses are very limited. You're allowed to have agricultural uses, residential uses, or other uses as allowed with a conditional use permit. The portion that's already quarried would not be suitable for agricultural uses, as it's already an active quarry. It would be well suited for a quarry use. The Shelton parcel would be suitable for the agricultural and residential uses to which it's currently restricted. However, due to the amount of limestone reserves that the applicant indicated are present, it would also be suitable for a limestone quarry. And so I was going to mention earlier, one thing we really look at with conditional use permits is what would be the detrimental impacts of approving the conditional use permit and removing that restriction against it. This shows the truck route, which was established with the original conditional use permit. They're limited to traffic along North 1200 Road until they get to East 2200 Road, which is a principal arterial, and then they can take that up to K-10 Highway or to the south. No changes are being proposed to this truck route. The applicant did ask that an access point be allowed, and you can see that with the star, on the western side of the Shelton parcel. This is currently allowing access in for the residents. They'd like to maintain it for limited quarry uses. This would be the quarry management, the surveying crew, the seismology crew, and the blasting crew. So we contacted the township, and they were okay with these smaller vehicles using the road, but they said no heavy quarry equipment would be permitted. No haul trucks or heavy equipment. And so that is one of the conditions. There's a condition allowing this as a limited access only, and prohibiting heavy quarry equipment and vehicles. So one of the changes they requested was an increase in the sales hours. I'm sorry, an increase in production hours. So we looked at this in relation to the comment that the City of Eudora made, the Planning Commission. They commented they had no objections as long as the use was not intensified. And so with the change in hours, we thought that changing hours may be appropriate, but the overall hours needed to stay the same. They wanted to revise their hours so they could be more competitive with the other large quarry in the county, the Big Springs Quarry. And so we looked at the hours and worked with the applicant to arrive at revised hours that did not increase the overall hours. And so on the left column, we have what Big Springs has, which is what they wanted to be more competitive with. In the middle, we show what Ham Eudora Quarry currently has and what they propose is in italics. So currently, they're allowed to have sales from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. from Monday through Saturday. In order to have additional production hours, this would be reduced from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday, which would reduce the number of hours trucks would be on the road hauling gravel from the quarry. In exchange for that, the production hours would be increased. They had requested to increase it from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., which is fairly similar to what Big Springs has. However, it's currently 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and so we kept the hour at 7 a.m. since that's what the area is used to, but I felt that expanding the hours to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then keeping the 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday would be appropriate. This keeps the overall operating hours at 75 hours a week while allowing them to adjust their sales and their production hours. So this is included in the recommended conditions or restrictions of use. And in the reclamation plan, when they get done with the quarrying, they do reclamation, but since they remove material, there's usually a pond or a water feature left in each phase. And due to the depth they're going to, especially in phase 1, the pond will be fairly significantly deep. And so the county engineer asked them to prepare a study to give him an idea of how long it would take these ponds to fill up with water to the planned water level. At the planned water level, the slope will be 3-to-1 slope. On the smaller pond on phase 2, that will extend to 5 feet below the planned water level. And on this larger pond on phase 1, it would extend to 15 feet below the planned water level. And this allows, if someone falls in, they have an opportunity to get out. You don't have the really steep banks. And it looks like it would take from 6 to 8 years for the ponds to fill up to that level. So the county engineer recommended a condition that these ponds be fenced as no trespassing and signed as dangerous, and that this would be continued until they are filled to the planned water level. Now, as this condition would exceed the limit of the conditional use permit, a pond protection or agreement would need to be executed. And we've been working with the county councilor to come up with a draft form of that, where the quarry operator would take on the signage. It would establish the responsibility for maintaining that signage and then removing that when the ponds have been filled. And they'll be fenced, to prevent someone getting into them. And so this would create a safety, it would improve the safety following reclamation. This is a graphic showing the Shelton parcel. It shows the various setbacks. And the area within the yellow lines is the area that could be quarried from. I didn't show the stream because on this aerial it's not really clear, but it would be an area 50 feet to the west of the stream and then within this yellow boundary. We also look at what the comprehensive plan says, and the comprehensive plan has several recommendations. One of them is very strong, is to minimize the conversion of agricultural lands to non-agricultural uses. With the quarry, the agricultural lands will be taken out of agricultural production for a time. When quarrying is complete, they'll be reclaimed, and is their intention to reclaim it in a manner so it is suitable again for agricultural uses. And then it recommends the proper extraction and remediation of natural materials such as sand, gravel, and timber, which are essential to sustainable development activity. And so it does recommend and identify that these kind of activities are necessary but they want the proper extraction and remediation. And I have neglected to mention a few things when I was talking about the detrimental effects. Lighting is always the principal concern of people within the area of a conditional use permit. So any exterior lighting that they use needs to be shielded. That's a new condition that would be applied to it. And if they planned on having permanent exterior lighting, a lighting plan would need to be submitted and approved before it was installed. And that would just prevent glare, off-site glare to nearby properties. In addition, prior to moving into a new phase, there is a pre-blast survey and a hydrology survey that's done. That was one of the conditions in the original conditional use permit. We've added some language to that to clarify how neighbors within the 1/2 mile area will be notified of this possibility. And so they need to send letters by certified mail to property owners within a 1/2 mile, letting them know they're going to move into that new phase and that they have the option of having this pre-blast survey and hydrology survey done. And so that way there's a little bit more notification. People are aware of that. And so one of the conditions the Planning Commission added was that they would get bids for the reclamation. This is very similar to the Big Springs Quarry. When they requested a reduction in their reclamation bid or bond, they had to get bids from 3 firms that were capable of performing the work. In this case, Ham's bid bond was only what the state required. So they're actually seeing an increase in their performance bond for reclamation. They provided these 3 bids. They were sent to the county engineer, Chad Voigt, to review to see if they were reasonable, and he felt that they were reasonable bids. So this is the amount, that one of these amounts would be the amount that we would set that performance bond for. And that way we would have a bond, and the purpose of that is if they would leave and not reclaim the site, then the county would have this money in reserve and they could reclaim it as shown on the reclamation plan. And so as I mentioned, the revised restrictions and conditions of use are listed in attachment A of your staff report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any about those. The Planning Commission voted 8-2 at their May 27th meeting to forward this to the County Commission with a recommendation for approval. They did have the revised condition, especially with the reclamation bids being provided. So that concludes my presentation, and I will see if I can stop sharing. And I did it.
Thank you, Mary. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mary?
I don't at this time. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks.
I do, and mostly regarding just the notification process. I'm wondering, Mary, can you describe what the how the notifications worked for the folks in Eudora as the Eudora Planning Commission was going to consider this? I just want to get a sense if those residential areas were aware, or if there was any signage posted, if they had any way of knowing, or if the notification was that kind of very narrow area around the.
Yeah, this was submitted prior to the adoption of the revised zoning regulations. So the notice was as required in the previous zoning regulations, and the Eudora Planning Commission received notice directly by getting the plans and the application.
So I'm sorry, say that again. So the Eudora Planning Commission considered this as a regular item on their Planning Commission agenda.
They were invited to a joint Planning Commission meeting at Douglas County. However, it was their practice, it was their choice to consider it separately and just provide written comments. So I assume they met at their Planning Commission meeting. I just know that they, rather than coming to the joint Planning Commission meeting, they provided their written comments.
So we assume they had a Planning Commission meeting around this. Do we assume that the public was notified of that Planning Commission meeting so there could be input from Eudora citizens who are near this project?
Mary Miller, planner again. Actually, the process is for them to come to the joint Douglas County Eudora Planning Commission meeting. We invite them to that. Occasionally, other cities' planning commissions choose to not comment, not attend, or sometimes they provide written comments. They sometimes develop these when they're working with their consultant. Sometimes they develop these when they have a planning commission meeting. We don't usually question them as to how they arrived at their comments. If they don't come to the joint planning commission meeting where they can vote and have their vote forwarded on to you, we take their comments and we forward that to you. But we're not involved in that part. They didn't come and have the joint
Right.
meeting, so I can't tell how they had arrived at their comments.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Do you have, I know Eudora has a proposed UGA. Do you have a way of showing us where that proposed UGA is in comparison to this?
No, it
expanded?
doesn't go to this area, but I don't have the ability to show the map, to overlay the map on this, because they've given us a paper map. I think we've seen that. I don't have that with me.
Okay. And I won't belabor the issue. As the representative of Eudora for the county commission, I just want to try to understand, especially since we have some citizen commentary now. I just want to make sure I understand how folks had the opportunity to weigh in on this or even learn about it. And there's one curiosity to me. You said that this is going to be a significantly deep pit. And so what is that in feet? How deep are we talking about?
Well, the actual depth will depend upon, when they hit the bottom of the reserves, but it could be as deep as 180 feet, I believe, and the applicant can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's quite a deep pond. And so that's why additional safety measures were seen as necessary.
And the estimation that it would take 6 to 8 years to fill, did that come from a hydrology study then, or how did that?
Mary Miller, planner. The county engineer requested a study and their consultant provided the study, and it had a lot of information about water. I can't really say if it was a drainage study, hydrology study. I think it was a form of a hydrology study, but I'm not a hydrology expert. Usually I see groundwater included in hydrology studies. The applicant, if they're here today, they could explain exactly what kind of a study that was.
Okay.
The applicant is on the call right now, but their legal representation is not on here. The name, I'm not seeing that person's name listed in the attendees. If they are on, I'm not seeing them and they need to raise their hand.
Mary Miller, I think he does have his hand raised. It would be Patrick Watkins.
Oh, okay. I had somebody different. Okay.
And while we're moving him over, Mary, would we be able to get a new map that shows the Eudora UGA that Commissioner Thurman requested for a future conversation on this?
Yes, I can bring the UGA they are going to propose. They have something, it has to have the county commission. The county commission has to approve it. And I believe I'm free to share it with all. I don't know if it's actually public information or not, but we've been working on it, so I think it is. So I should be able to bring you. Pardon me? Okay.
I do think that'd be helpful. I just want to understand how this is communicated about in Eudora, how it's perceived in terms of future growth, and kind of what the process was. Not that we can step into Eudora's process, but just to understand what people's awareness is of this and the general public kind of perception and sense of impact on future growth. And I guess I'd be interested if the Planning Commission has meeting minutes of their meetings or something to refer to.
I can ask them if I'll ask them how they arrived at their comments, and if it was a meeting, if they notified the public, and also if we could have the minutes.
Thank you. I'd appreciate it.
I can show the UGA if I share my screen, if you'd like.
Go ahead, Chad.
Give me just a second, Chad. I'm going to take the co-host away from Mary, and I'm going to give it to.
Okay.
For those of you
Just a
listening, this is Chad Voigt, County Engineer. Well, I'm not Chad Voigt. He's Chad Voigt.
You're all set, Chad. You should be good to share.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm not 100% sure, but in our GIS system, this is what is shown for the UGA for Eudora in the red line. Whether that's current or proposed, Mary might be able to tell us. And the quarry is off over here at the county line. I'll zoom in a little tighter. So basically the UGA goes to E2300 road, the gravel road.
I'd have to pull up my map. I don't know for sure if they were planning on having a tiered system. So their most recent UGA map shows 2 tiers, kind of the current UGA, and then what they'd be looking at is the future UGA. I can't say if those are the boundaries, but.
Okay.
Yeah, I do, as I recall, I think they're working through that kind of new Plan 2040 tiered system, and I don't know where they are. I just think it would be helpful to have a good sense of where their expected growth is. Not that we have a decision to make about their future, we do have a part to play. It would just help me to have a sense of where that boundary is.
Any other questions for Mary before we ask the applicant to say a few words? Mary, before we let you go, remind me of the 500-foot blasting zone. That's in code. Is that correct?
Just one moment. You mean as far as the current regulations?
Uh-huh.
I will have to look that up. Well, the current code, this is Mary Miller, planner. The current code has the following setbacks. No excavation or other quarrying or mining activity is permitted within 300 feet of a residence. No quarrying activity can be located closer than 50 feet from an adjoining property. No excavation shall occur closer than 100 feet from the right-of-way. And I don't see a specific blasting setback. So I think it would just be included in those setbacks.
So those indications that we had on the map of the distance from homes, is that something the applicant put on? Is that a state regulation?
It's something they had on their original conditional use permit, and Big Springs Quarry added it to theirs. They felt like it gave residents a bigger sense of security. And most of the quarry operators I speak with don't feel it's necessary, but they just provided it voluntarily. They could have been within 300 feet, but.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll turn it over to the applicant. Patrick Watkins, I think, is here representing the applicant.
Yes, this is Patrick Watkins. I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of the Ham Companies. Thank you, Commissioner Kelly, and thank you, commissioners, for your attention this evening. We certainly value the opportunity to provide a presentation to you all, and we appreciate your willingness to hear us this evening amid all of the other work that you have to do. One of the reasons we appreciate it so much is because we've been working as a team for several months with the city planning staff. This is I think our initial application went in November. But with me here on this call is a number of people from the Ham companies and consultants that are involved in this application. And I'll very briefly introduce them. Gary Ham is on the line. He is the strategic planning manager for the Ham companies. Ryan Blosser is on the line. He's the president of the Ham companies. Ramon Gonzalez is the director of sales at the Eudora Quarry. Bob Rawls is the director of geology for Ham. And Brendan Devereaux is the vice president of aggregates for Ham. These folks are all available to answer questions about the operations or the purpose behind this application. We also have Phyllis Hazer with Vibratech Engineers with us. She's with the third-party seismology firm that Ham works with to monitor blasting at its quarries. Brett Richter is with Buckley Powder. Buckley Powder is a third-party firm that manages blasting compliance. And Austin Quick is with Blackstone Environmental, which provided the exhibits that are a part of our application. And it's the group that provided the quarry hydrological evaluation that Mary referred to and that Commissioner Thumman was asking about. And that is a study that we provided, and it provides some information about the depths of those ponds, which Mary accurately reflected. This team has worked with the planning staff over the last several months, and we're pleased to have received the planning staff's diligent work and their recommendation for support on our application. And we're pleased to receive the Planning Commission's support when it heard our application in May. The Eudora Quarry has been highly productive in recent years, and it provides a significant supply of rock to customers primarily within Douglas County. There's two reasons the quarry has been so productive. The first is its location. It's located close enough to both the city of Lawrence and the Kansas City area to have competitive hauling rates for road construction and general construction projects. But the second reason this quarry is highly productive is that the rock is really exceptional. You can see a cross-section of the limestone ledges on page 5 of the staff report. That exhibit comes directly from our core sample. And the Stoner ledge and the Captain Creek ledge closer to the surface both produce very high-density limestone rock. This is useful for concrete because the rock is more durable, and stronger concrete is better for high-intensity roads and longer-lasting product, which ultimately is more efficient and cost-effective. The high-density rock is also ideal for asphalt because it has a lower absorption rate, and you have to apply less oil, which makes it more cost-effective and a longer-lasting product. Having a competitively priced concrete and asphalt supplier at this location within Douglas County is a true community asset. But in addition to the high-density rock, there's two other ledges that you can see near the top of the cross-section in the South Bend ledge and Spring Hill limestone ledges that produce rock types that can be used for a range of other applications and products. And so, although most of the rock that comes out of the Eudora Quarry is useful for roads, the quarry is really full service in the sense that it provides a full range of products. It's been instrumental, this quarry has been instrumental in just about every major concrete or asphalt project in recent history. 15th Street interchange, Castle reconstruction, 9th Street, 19th Street, Highway 56. The list goes on. AB3 and road rock from the Eudora Quarry covers a good portion of the county's roads and the surrounding township roads. It's also been supplied for a number of construction projects, including the LMH expansion, the Venture Park buildings, the KU student housing projects, LHS and Free State additions. Those are just some of the major projects, but there's countless smaller projects, including home improvement projects, which we know are popular right now. Mary did a nice job of explaining the application in the current status of things. These are not simple projects, and Mary's done a nice job of keeping things in order. When the Eudora Quarry CUP was last approved in 2003, the list of conditions and restrictions included 15 individual topics. That list at the time was meant to be comprehensive, but as Mary described, those conditions provide safeguards and limitations for every aspect of the operations. With this application, the list of conditions has increased to 22 individual topics, and the Ham companies finds these 22 individual restrictions of use to be adequate and satisfactory, and we agree with the county planning staff's thorough application of these restrictions to our application to expand the quarry. if you have any questions about our application, we'd enjoy the opportunity to respond. The entire team is available here, and I think we can make quick work of questions that you may have today. We do know that there's been a flurry of correspondence in the last few days, and frankly, we're not really surprised with that. We've been working with Mr. Nice and Adria Burks through the planning office over the last several months. A lot of their concerns were brought to the attention of the Planning Commission and were addressed at that hearing. And a lot of their concerns have been addressed in the planning process by Mary Miller. Ms. Burks and Mr. Nice are well aware that they could have submitted their 18-page letter with enough time for you all to review it. Unfortunately, it came in yesterday, and we provided a brief response to it. But we're happy to provide additional information and explain how a lot of this has been covered. But again, certainly understand your perspective, able to answer questions today.
Patrick, maybe I'll start with questions. If we defer it, does that have any impact on the project? I mean, when does our deferral start to impact your project significantly?
Well, I'll say that we started this process hoping that we could have benefited from expanded quarry operations in March and April. So we're quite a bit behind schedule. If we're talking about a 1-week delay, you'll see some head nods if you have visual of our entire team. I think at this point we're eager to get this addressed, and we feel like the planning staff has done a really diligent job. I think if we're talking about July 8th, it's probably something we can stomach. But if we're going to push it out beyond 1 week, we're really going to be pressed to figure out what to do. The whole purpose of this is to make sure that we can keep this quarry in operation. And the reserves are a concern. We certainly understand that the quarry reserves are not one of the reasons to justify expanding a quarry, but that's the whole purpose we're here. We're running out, and we certainly need to get access to more. These projects are important, and this is an ideal and productive place for expanding the quarry. That's a little long-winded, but we'd love to be heard tonight. Certainly, if not tonight, then next Wednesday.
Thank you, Patrick. Other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions. Let's see, it looks like we have one attendee who would like to make public comment. I appreciate folks coming. You need to use the raise your hand function in Zoom. Sarah, is there anybody there at the courthouse that has public comment?
I don't have anyone here for that.
Okay. So Jill, if you'd move that person in, and we'll take public comment.
Yep, I've moved Catherine Ellsworth over, so she should be ready to provide her comment.
Thank you. Hi, Catherine. Catherine, you're unmuted, so if you'd like to speak with us, you can either turn on your video or just talk to us now.
Her mic could maybe not be enabled. We could pause her, and there's another question I could move over while we wait.
Yeah, Jill, looks like we have another person who is hoping to speak as well. Am I seeing
Yep.
that? We'll come back to Catherine. Hopefully she can get her mic working.
Okay. I'm only able to see 912-522-70310. If you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak for public comment.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please give us your name and address if you don't mind. Thanks for speaking with the commission.
Yes, this is Adria Burks. I'm the attorney from Arthur Nice, 638 Illinois, Lawrence, Kansas. I want to thank you all for your attention to this matter. Arthur Nice submitted very detailed analytical information for the commissioners, 10 pages of it in the package. And I want to direct your attention to that because it includes information about the soil content and the productivity of this property, which is contrary to the information that I believe has been given to the staff. The concept that the property is to be reclaimed for agricultural purposes is misleading, because part of this property will never be reclaimed for agricultural purposes. It will be reclaimed as a body of water. And part of it will be out of production for probably decades. So as we look at the Shelton parcel, the quality of soil in that is such that it has high-grade soil that I think should be considered in conjunction with the use and comparison of use. Additionally, we provided information to the commission about studies that were done about the location of the Argentine and the Farley-based rock strata. Rather than being considered to be rare, they are plentiful in Wyandotte, Johnson, and Douglas counties. And I provided you the geological survey information on that because although they are probably under the Farley strata, they're probably under Lawrence, Kansas as well. And the question becomes really, as Eudora has grown and come south, which is its natural population progression, it is expanding onto the parameters. The Shelton parcel has basically served as a buffer. And continuing, if you look at where the Peat Fish Quarry is, then onto the Nice lease, then onto the, now onto the requested Shelton parcel, you're in a situation that you're coming closer and closer to Eudora itself. Staff had recommended to the Zoning Commission that there be a hydrology study and that there be a traffic study. There is no discussion with the Planning Commission as to whether or not a traffic study or a hydrology study is needed. However, in looking at the information that was presented, the staff was, Austin Quick indicated that the information that they gave was not based on any site review, but was a theoretical analysis. Additionally, the Corps of Engineers indicated to my staff, which is documented by affidavit, that they did not go on staff on property. When the Corps of Engineers gave mitigation bank credits onto this project, what it ended up doing was saying purchase mitigation bank credits. Those mitigation bank credits aren't even in Douglas County. So we're taking wetlands, we're taking water usage out of this property, and we're saying, okay, buy mitigation credits. But you all are being asked to look at this in terms of Douglas County and the water impact on Douglas County. Additionally, because we don't have production records other than to know that this property is above county average historically in terms of its production, when you're talking about putting land back into production as agricultural, without the production records, you don't have a basis to judge that. Hams and through Mr. Watkins' letter is saying, we've gotten the governor's award for reclamation. Because they've gotten the governor's award for reclamation, that says nothing about what they're going to do for this parcel. And in fact, we are losing agricultural land on this parcel. In my letter that I submitted, there's an Exhibit D. What that Exhibit D is a compilation of the verbiage from the commission meetings from 2009 and 2015. If you look at the compilation, the commissioners have historically grappled with issues on traffic and dust. And then if you look at the letters that were submitted to the zoning commission, you continue to see that there are issues with traffic and dust that haven't been, obviously, the proposed solutions that we have come up with have not really addressed the matter. We have a situation that 2200 Road, East 2200 Road, which is the main street, now has a assisted living facility that has 55 residential units, and I think it's 25 employees. We have subdivisions that are feeding into 2200 Road, and we're not looking at whether or not a traffic study is needed on 2200 Road. You're going to have, by virtue of it being an assisted living facility, at least people with limited capabilities driving onto 2200 Road, going cross traffic to go north, because that's where your services are going to be. And they're going to be crossing in front of big gravel trucks, rock trucks. We're suggesting that there needs, as the staff also suggested, that at least the zoning commission should have considered a traffic study. Additionally, on North 1300 Road, Ham has told the staff, we're just going to use North 1300 Road for our own staff coming and going from the quarry. But we have no numbers on that. We don't know how many employees are anticipated to be utilizing that. The township has said, we don't want large trucks on that. The city of Eudora has said, we don't want additional traffic. But we don't have a traffic study, which is the basis for that. Additionally, Hams has admitted that there are big trucks that go down 1300 Road. So at one point, Mr. Browning suggested that, okay, we'll just post it. Well, obviously, posting it for no heavy trucks is not sufficient, because you've still got heavy trucks that are using 1300 Road. For my client, Arthur Nice, that becomes an additional problem, because the pH on his property, which is adjacent to 1300 Road, is significantly elevated than any other, that's adjacent to 2200 Road, is significantly elevated from that's on North 1300 Road and also on East 2400 Road. Now, something is causing that pH to be higher, which adversely affects production. I think we need a traffic study so that we can at least know what kind of traffic is currently going down there, that road. Also, if you look at the letters to the zoning commission, they're notified that one of the farmers, James Gabriel and Robert Gabriel Sr., have a cattle operation, and they regularly are having to vaccinate their cattle for dust pneumonia. Another neighbor has talked about, Karen Rowland, has talked about the dust, and I also, on my letter of May 22nd, observed the dust that was there that caused me to have to pull over into the ditch so a truck could go by because I couldn't see. That's a safety factor. When we talk, there is a 20%, there's a requirement that once a year an opacity study be done on that quarry. I don't see that opacity study has been reviewed, and I also don't see that there's been any consideration as to whether or not that opacity study should be applied to roadway usage. When we talk about dust control, Ham says we'll deal with dust control once a year on 1200 Road, but other than that, it's up to the township to do that. And staff has said in the zoning commission, oh, people need to call us if there's a problem with dust. In looking at the CUP, I see no indication as to how neighbors are to communicate when there is a dust problem. But I do repeatedly, year after year, see records of dust problems. I set forth in my letter on June 30th, which was not in the packet, although Mr. Nice's 10-page letter dealing with the data analysis was, my legal concerns in terms of information that was omitted or information in which you all have, in which staff has received broad statements that are not substantiated. I don't know if you all have had an opportunity to read through that, but I would direct you to pages 11 to 13, where I, by bullet point, go through information that where hams are making broad statements that are not substantiated. For instance, to the zoning commission, Mr. Watkins said, basically purification is not a problem because water is going to be going through the rocks and it'll be purified that way. We don't have anything that says that that's the case. In fact, we don't have a study that talks about what is the quality of water on the Shelton parcel. We don't know what minerals are in it. We do not know if there are any toxins in it currently. If we don't have a baseline, we have no way to judge how that quarry operation is impacting the safety of the water. Likewise, Mr. Nice, in 2009, had a study that was done on his property that dealt with his streams and his wetlands. And the conclusion on that study was that although the quantity of water was not large, the culmination of the water was in and of itself very large. I think the same type of study should be done on the Shelton property so we know what we're losing in terms of quality and quantity of water. The assumption that rock is scarce, which was part of one of the zoning commissioner's statements, is not supported by any data at all. We have the statement, that it's helpful for building material, but there is no analysis in terms of the cost by requiring Ham to move this, to close this quarry and move to an adjacent to area further out in the county that's further apart from residential areas. I raised the question of rock royalties because I was in the commission meeting in 2002 when the commissioners were considering royalties. And Charlie Jones made the motion that was unanimously approved that the cost of living index would be applied to that rock royalty. When I realized that that had never been done, I wrote a letter to the zoning commission. However, the zoning commission, although they talked about it, they did not vote to require the staff, to recommend that the staff actually go ahead and do those assessments and deal with the back assessments that were done. Mr. Watkins has provided an analysis in terms of what he thinks that would be with the cost of living index that came through this morning, and I, like you, probably have not had opportunity to look at that data to see how accurate it is. But I do know that even if his data is accurate, if I owed the county $12,000, you'd be expecting me to pay the county $12,000. Likewise, Hams should be paying that back CLI index against those royalties.
Ms. Burks?
Yes.
We don't have a time limit here at the county commission usually, but are you making your way to the end, hopefully?
I am making my way to the end. When you talk about granting a CUP, it's based on due process for it to be valid. And for it to be valid, it has to be fair and impartial. So to be impartial, you need to have substantiating data to deal with statements to support your position. There are, I set out on pages 11 through 13 areas where we're missing data and assumptions are made on Ham's behalf in making a recommendation. I'm asking the matter be remanded back to staff to explore those items so that in issuing a CUP, it's issued on the basis of facts, and it is impartial, and it does support the health and safety of the community at large. So with that, Mr. Kelly, if you have any questions, I did want to say I have requested through the Kansas Open Records Act any opacity studies that they have done. And I've also requested through the Corps of Engineers, through the Freedom of Information Act, further information on their files. But they have indicated to us verbally that they have only based their decisions on information that HAM has provided them and have not gone out to the site to actually inspect the site. So there has been no inspection by independent governmental authorities that I'm aware of to check for water quality or quantity on that site.
Any other public comment?
Patrick, I would ask that we would try, I think Catherine Ellsworth has tried to get in. I know that she'd like to be able to speak if we can work a little harder to give her another shot.
Yes, I believe she's there now. Hi, Catherine. Can you hear me? Catherine, I think we can hear you. Catherine? Catherine, this is Douglas County Commissioner Patrick Kelly. We'd love to hear your public comment. If you can hear us, go ahead and talk and we'll be able to take your public comment.
The other alternative that we can offer her is I can read off the phone number. If she's having challenges with her mic, she could try calling in 1-346-248-7799 is the number that's linked to this Zoom meeting.
And commissioners, my assumption would be that we would have public comment again when we bring this item back before the commission. So if we're not able to get Ms. Ellsworth's comments tonight, I know I spoke to her on the phone as well yesterday. We'll have an opportunity to take additional public comment when the item comes back.
Yes, Mary.
Mary Miller, planner. I had forgotten to mention that Chad Voigt has been working with the quarry operator on the 10 cent per ton rock fee. And he came today to discuss the reclamation bond and also to provide information on that fee. So I thought if he had any information, he may want to share that with you.
I think we've got Catherine on the call. Catherine, can you hear us? We can see you.
No.
Can't hear you yet. If you'll go down to the bottom left-hand corner, you see where the microphone is there? There's a little arrow, looks like a little carrot. Click on that and make sure, maybe change which mic is on. No, we still can't hear you, sorry. Jill, if you could text her somehow, or I don't know, chat her. She may not be able to get in the chat here. Yeah, we could probably do it in the chat, couldn't we?
Sure. Yeah, she should be able, as a panelist, she should be able to open up the chat. Yeah, let me put something in there for her.
Keep trying, Catherine. We're hanging in there with you. Chad, if you want to talk about the the fee that Mary talked about, since you've been waiting so diligently?
Well, I don't know that I have much to add. I did review it and it seems reasonable. They do owe $12,000 roughly, but you got to keep in mind they've paid $300,000. So it's about a 4% error or oversight that we've had over, I think 2014 was when we would have started at 10 cents. So 5 or 6 years at the consumer price index. So certainly going forward, we want to follow the CUP and raise that each year. And currently, I think we're just a shade under 11 cents would be the new number that we start with for 2020. So that makes sense. The other issue was the performance bonds, and those were interesting. They're on a per acre basis. So, you know, that leaves the option open for if they only do 20 acres and they want to reclaim that, then they go forward at that rate. But the per acre cost was this, and you know, similar for 3 different estimates that they got. So I assume, you know, those numbers look good to me and should look good to others.
Thank you, Chad. Catherine, can you hear me?
Computer problems. It's my first Zoom.
Oh, that's okay. We can hear you now.
Okay. I missed some of the conversation because I was dealing with my computer. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. So I'm sorry I missed some of the conversation. I'm sorry to have wasted your time with my computer problems, but I wanted to say that the characterization of this area as agricultural is really disingenuous. We are, while it is agricultural, only a mile over is Church Street, which is our main artery through town. So that will be a mile from the new quarry. And on Church Street, I've sent you an email with a map, but there's the nursing home, which someone previously mentioned, but there's also 2 subdivisions with probably close to 300 homes, and it's platted for more, as well as the high school, junior high, all our sports facilities, the Performing Arts Center, and a tech school that serves not only Eudora, but also DeSoto and Mill Valley. So Church Street is a very important artery for this town, and that is 1 mile from the quarry and is the truck route that's used. And that's kind of been glossed over, but the traffic that's on Church is really a hindrance to our community. So I'll sign off and let you take it from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it. Sarah, do we have any more public comment there at the courthouse? No. And I don't see any online, Jill.
Nope.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission if you have any further questions or if you want to make a motion or comment.
Well, I just, I want to say in my effort to try to get my brain around this big project this afternoon, I did watch the video from the Planning Commission. So that was a long meeting, and it was I feel like it was a really in-depth presentation, both from Mary and from the applicant's side. I didn't quite hear the depth tonight, so I think I want to go back and read a little more and listen a little more. But I think the thing that struck me, I think there's absolutely a need for quarries. They're terribly difficult to place, to locate, and so I absolutely recognize that. I think the thing that's just that I really want to understand kind of what the process was for the folks in Eudora to know that this proposal is out there, because it's a big deal. Like having a quarry, present is understandably a big deal for a community, and then to have it expanded significantly is another big deal. And my concern is whether there was really a process there for folks to be aware of that, so that there is an opportunity to understand this project, to to just so that there's that opportunity, rather than wake up the next morning and realize a decision was made that wasn't transparent to didn't seem transparent to the public. So that's my main concern right now, and I have to say, the question about whether how long can the applicant wait before it gets uncomfortable, I don't know. I think the discomfort of the folks in Eudora probably is important to weigh in to the calculation too, in terms of when we meet. I don't know that a week from now wouldn't. That might be fine. But I just think we need to be. I'm not trying to obstruct anything. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it a little more and understand a little bit more of the process from the Eudora standpoint. So I can work on that this week. I think Mary has some homework assignments from us. Whether a week is enough, I don't know, but it's important to consider the applicant's needs, but I think we also have to make sure the folks in Eudora that their needs are considered as well.
Sarah, do you want to talk about our agenda for next week and what maybe that looks like?
At this point, we generally put the agenda together tomorrow is when the deadline is. I know we have the update on right now it looks pretty light. I don't have any huge items. We'll have the CARES Act resolution, but I don't think that would take a significant amount of time.
So Commissioner Thelman, did you want to make a motion there, or?
Well, are you all comfortable with just a week delay, or, is that
Yes.
your sense of a fair delay? Okay. Then I would respectfully make a motion to delay this, to defer this item until a week from tonight.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you to the applicants and members of the community for coming and visiting with us. We will go on to the next item, which is a presentation on cost allocation from the City of Lawrence. I believe Danielle is here.
While Danielle is getting ready to speak, I just wanted to provide some context for this item on our agenda. As we are in the middle of budget presentations, we had questions about the city's internal service fund and cost allocation of those costs to service lines, and many of those service lines the county is in partnership with the city on, in terms of providing that service jointly to the community. So this is really just informational at this point, and an opportunity for the commission to ask questions and just learn a little bit more about what the city's doing in that regard. So with that, I'll turn it over to Danielle.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sarah. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. This. Ooh, that is not the side you want to see. Let me go with let me go with option B. Okay. So as Sarah mentioned, so I'm Danielle Bushcutter with the City of Lawrence, and I'm the Budget and Strategic Initiatives Administrator. And joining me on the call tonight is Jeremy Wilmoth, our Finance Director as well. And so, as Sarah alluded to, this is really just meant to provide some context to some of the things that we've been doing related to cost allocation over the last couple years, and kind of start from the beginning a little bit. So I know we touched on this a little bit in the budget discussions with FireMed last year. We've been having these conversations as a city for a number of years. So really just trying to kind of come full circle and give you all kind of the full perspective of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I apologize if any of this is duplicative of any of that information I've shared previously, but I think having that context is really important. So we're going to start from the beginning and when these conversations really started. So the City of Lawrence adopted our current iteration of our strategic plan in March of 2017. And as part of that, the plan is structured so that we have 7 critical success factors is what we call them, but they're just goal areas. And within that, there are 8 priority initiatives. So these were more specific things that we wanted to accomplish in the next 2 to 3 years. One of those items was related to the budget and actually implementing priority-based budgeting and improving the way that we kind of communicate and talk about the budget. So priority-based budgeting is a 5-step process to identify what it is as a city we do, what are the services that we provide the community, how much does it cost to provide those services, and then go through a prioritization process. So this really started at the department level, and we had a scoring matrix that was based on our strategic plan. And departments scored all of those programs, and then we had a peer review process and then analysis. So I think a lot of what we're seeing tonight is the things that happen kind of in that analysis phase that we'll get into in a little bit more detail. So what is priority-based budgeting? It's really just a different way to approach the budget. So I know you all are in your budget deliberations right now. We are also in the middle of our budget process right now. And typically those conversations kind of structure around the various funds that we have available, the various departments that we have working in our different operations and focusing on the budget from that perspective. Priority-based budgeting kind of changes the lens of the budget, if you will, to really focus on what are the programs that are being provided, and having that conversation on a programmatic level instead of just at the fund or departmental level. And then, as I mentioned, it's really identifying the costs of providing those various services, and then going through a prioritization process. And this is really done to help link the funding decisions that you all are in the process of making and we are in the process of making as well, to the priorities that have been identified and established. So that's really the intent of this. And the other is, quite frankly, to also help identify the potential efficiencies that may be available. And so it was really in this portion of it that we really found some critical areas that we may be able to have some efficiencies in, because we noticed quite a bit of overlap between departments. So the example I think I used when we presented this to our commission a year ago was our IT function. So we had an IT department, but when we looked at the IT function across the entire organization, we were finding that all of our other departments were doing a lot of things in the world of IT administration as well. So it really started to kind of open our eyes in terms of how much of these centralized functions that we have are really being done in all of our different operational departments. And so some of these conversations really started to form out of that analysis. So this is where we started with the internal service fund itself. For this current year, 2020, was really kind of phase 1 of this implementation process. And so we moved our risk management function, our human resources, finance, and information technology function into an internal service fund, and we costed those dollars back out to the various functions. So just for some context, all of these functions that you're seeing for both phase 1 and phase 2 were costs that were being borne predominantly by the general fund. When in reality, they were helping to support all of our functions, and we have a number of enterprise funds. And so we were trying to do things here and there to account for some of this, but moving to the internal service fund model was a much more effective and transparent model for us to use as an organization. So phase 1 happened in this current fiscal year, and then phase 2 is what we are preparing in our fiscal year 2021 budget that we are in the process of bringing forward to the City Commission. So in that, we will join the City Manager's Office, the City Attorney's Office, Public Information, our Commission, City Clerk, and then Facility Maintenance into that internal service fund. And hopefully this is phase 2 of 2. But we are constantly learning, and this is constantly evolving as we look at how we operate as an organization. So one of the, I already mentioned this, but a phased implementation, these are really the core functions that we wanted to get in, and we really at the front end set forth to say these are the functions we want to include. And it really helps us in allocating those costs, like I mentioned, to all of our various operating funds, and to help identify a true cost of providing services. I think that was one of the things that we heard in some of our budget discussions a couple years ago is what is the true cost of providing services for Parks and Recreation or for FireMed or for our various enterprise funds. And this is hopefully a step to help us move in that direction to be able to really identify some of those kind of back-end services that are needed to support our various operations. And then finally is really to align expenses with the appropriate cost center and help coordinate services. And I think this is one of the areas that I think will be really important for us as an organization to really treat it and serve and help us look and feel like a true service to the various operations in our that we have as a city and as an organization. And so kind of changing some of that dynamic a little bit so that we can really help support our functions that are out serving the public directly. So I'm going to quickly go through the methodology. It wouldn't be a presentation about budget without one chart with some numbers, and then I'll kind of wrap it up for some questions. But the methodology is one of the areas that I anticipate will continue to evolve and continue to change as we get more information and more data. But currently, the way that we have it structured is varied based on the particular function that we're talking about. So risk management is encapsulating our workers' compensation, our liability, and then the cost of actually functioning our risk management division. So we have one staff person dedicated to this at the City of Lawrence. So it's capturing those costs. For HR, it is done on a per FTE basis. Information technology is done on a per device basis to really try to get at the direct support that they're providing to the various functions based on how much they're using that particular service. And then the remaining functions are done on a percentage of the operating budget. And when we say that, I think it's important to acknowledge that we pull out transfers, we pull out debt service, we pull out capital. It's really just those day-to-day operating costs that we have taken a percentage of that and then cost allocated it out. So here's the one chart I promised with some numbers. I will say these numbers are outdated and it will look a little different when we actually present the budget in a couple weeks, but this gives you a good kind of context as to what we're talking about. So this is just showing the general fund. I wanted to keep it as specific to you all as I can. It's really more informational, but really just wanted to highlight that in the general fund, we break it down further, and it's the only fund we do that. But we thought it was important to acknowledge that general overhead, so all of the non-public safety functions kind of go in one bucket, and then we capture police and fire in a separate bucket because they are such a large portion of our general fund operating budget. So this breaks out those 4 functions that we have currently in place for 2020. And one thing I want to note on the information technology, because it is very different than the others, is that our police department actually has their own IT division within that function. And so this was one of the things that we learned from doing it this year. If you look at the 2020 budget, you'll see that we did cost allocate some of our IT function to police, when in reality, they're not really using those services. They have their own IT division within that operation. So we pulled those out. So I just wanted to make note of that because it does look a little odd when you look at the entire chart. And then we just lumped together the phase 2 functions all in one, just so we had a chart that you all could actually read. So like I mentioned, these numbers are shifting and changing a little bit, but just to give you all a little bit of context, I did want to include it. And that is all in terms of my formal presentation. I am certainly happy to answer any questions you all have, but as Sarah mentioned, really the intent of this is to be informational and to make sure that you all are aware of and know what's really making up that internal service fund cost that you see in the fire med budget.
Maybe one thing before commissioners ask questions, just to sort of clarify and provide some information. So Douglas County doesn't have any enterprise funds. So that's a term that our commission isn't very used to. Enterprise funds are traditionally like with a utility, where you have ratepayers that are paying for those costs. That are traditionally held in an enterprise fund. Parks and Recreation, where you have user fees for people using services. Those are great examples of enterprise funds. Here at Douglas County, we do not have enterprise funds. I have a lot of experience with enterprise funds from Johnson County, but we're lucky enough to not have any. And I think that's really important for this conversation is if you have ratepayers, and your payroll department in HR or your clerk's office is doing payroll for all those utility workers, well, it makes sense that you allocate some of the cost of payroll, for example, to the folks, the ratepayers, as I would say, or the users of the Parks and Recreation Fund. And so that's really the kind of, I think, a fundamental basis why it is. And I do agree it's important for the city to have some of those costs so you can really get the true cost of providing those services. It's just also just a concept that because we don't have enterprise funds that is less familiar to our commission.
Thank you. My apologies about that.
No, you're fine.
Questions, commissioners?
I have one, Danielle. If you could go back to the screen where you had the breakdown of like fire, police, general fund. Okay, thank you. So I think you said previously that for like your information technology, that's done on a per device charge. So that would be like every laptop, every desktop. I'm guessing for like the fire department, it would be every little radio they have.
It is for, yeah, it's for those major pieces of equipment that our IT function helps support. So it could be cell phones, or if there's a laptop or a Surface or a desktop, those types of devices that are being used.
Okay, but none of that would include like anything, and maybe Sarah, at like dispatch. This is all just equipment that the fire department has.
That is correct.
Okay. So. Okay, thank you.
And I think that brings up an interesting point. You know, as the commission is aware here, we have a much more centralized funding of services here. It's the model that's been in place in Douglas County for a long period of time. We don't currently allocate in many of our agreements with the city of Lawrence full costs in some cases, and what I would consider the cost allocation type charges to those agreements. And so I think, you know, this is what's important for the commission to understand as we have conversations, not only in budget in terms of those expenses, but as we talk through agreements, that we have an understanding of how we would have to approach it. It doesn't mean that the county couldn't develop those internal mechanisms and either rearrange our budget to reflect that, or simply track it in a way that we could demonstrate what our own version of cost allocation or internal service funds expenses would be for agreements, but it's just not currently how we're set up.
Okay. So does this include, Danielle, like any type of technology that would be in an ambulance? Or is it just?
I would have to go back and look at the exact list that was provided. I don't know offhand specifically how granular granular that got. I can certainly go back and look at that though. I would say a lot of the IT are some of the direct costs as well. So it's paying the phone bill, it's paying to provide protection to computers and some of those very tangible, specific costs related to the different functions. So quite a bit of that cost is related specifically to that. And when you have a function as large as fire in terms of, you know, cell phones and laptops and surfaces and those sorts of things, that stuff, those devices add up pretty quickly.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle.
Danielle, I just want to make sure I understand it. So you in 2020, you added 4 different services, right, to that internal service line. And the next year you added, was it 5 or 6 more? And then in return, you're applying those costs to the different services that are provided by the city of Lawrence, right? So would that be to expect that the city is moving towards increasing like utility rates again as you continue to add those costs to that fee for service?
That's a great question. So I didn't get into the specifics of it, but some of those costs, particularly in our water and sewer fund, we were trying to account for them, but not in a robust model. And so what I mean by that is before 2020, we did cost allocate some positions. So some of the city manager's office, for example, part of their salary was paid for out of the general fund, part of their salary was paid for out of the water and sewer fund. And so what we did when we did this is we said, okay, we don't want to have that be the methodology. We want a very clear methodology. So we pulled all of those costs that were already being accounted for in the water and sewer fund and in those other functions out of the budget, and then basically replaced it with an internal service fund cost allocation line, instead of it being a little bit of insurance and a little bit of, you know, salaries and a little bit of IT costs. So a lot of it was just doing a much better job of A, identifying those costs in a really clear and transparent way, and B, pulling out some of those dollars that were already included in those budgets to be a lot more clear to say, this is actually what it costs for us to, you know, provide our city manager's office or our IT function. So A lot of it was just cleanup and moving dollars from line item A to B, just to be more transparent and clear about it.
Thanks. Any other questions for Danielle? This is not an action item, but it is a regular agenda item. So let's see if we have anybody who would like to provide public comment on this item. Anybody there at the courthouse, Sarah?
I don't have anyone.
Any online attendees?
Nope,
Thank-
not that I'm seeing.
Thank you, Jill. Any questions or further comments from commissioners on this item?
Danielle, thanks for joining us this morning and again this evening.
It's good to see you. I just got it all in one day, so thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Danielle. And thank you, Jeremy, for being here. Appreciate it. Okay, with that, we'll move on to appointments. And I do remember.
I think Jan's asking us to appoint Lindsay Crick to, it would be a full term on the Heritage Conservation Council. She's been a tremendous asset to that group. She's a public historian, preservationist, planner, has tremendous background for that work. So are you all comfortable if I go ahead and make a motion?
Yes.
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay. I move to appoint Lindsay Crick to another full term on the Heritage Conservation Council.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Passes 3-0. Any other appointments? I don't think so. Okay, we'll move on to general public comment. Anyone there at the courthouse for general public comment, Jill? Anyone online, just go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to make general public comment. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to, thanks, Jill. We'll move to Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous, and we usually start this time off with Sarah.
Thank you, commissioners. You have, my weekly memo is in the packet. This week's memo really just includes some updates to our budget, to the budget schedule, just so you have that again. So no real changes to it, just some additions and clarifications. So those are in there. And I do want to say we've got what I've had a couple conversations with Robin and Daviana, and we are working on getting you some open and upcoming appointments as we kind of we've got some appointments that'll be coming due soon, and we want to make sure you guys know that they're coming on the radar. And then Robin's going to get some additional information related to if somebody is eligible for reappointment. And so you all would know that. So we'll keep you posted and updated on that memo in the weekly memo on that. So if there's additional appointments that need to be made. And that's all I have.
On that note, did we ever follow up or hear back from the Fair Board on the people that they were hoping to extend for an additional year or anything?
No, that's kind of new to me. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, you were gone.
Oh, that was the week. Okay.
It was a conversation with that I had with George Hunsinger, and he said that he and another member on the Fair Board had realized that all of they're about to go off, and all of their experience in preparation for this year's fair wouldn't necessarily transfer to the people who would be brought on. And so that they were wondering if the Fair Board might consider having us extend their terms by a year so they could do their last fair and transfer their knowledge kind of in a more, a less COVID way. And I did, I reached out to him and let him know that we had discussed it briefly, but that we asked that he would take it to the Fair Board and have them have a more formal conversation and bring it to us in a more formal way if they want us to think about that. And he said he would do that.
I would alert Okay, I would alert the commissioners that I believe we have a resignation in a township headed your way. And so I think you'll have that in the next week or two too.
Do you know which township?
Willow Springs, correct, Michelle?
That sounds about right, yes.
So, and those vacancies are filled, the county commission fills those. But I think we may have a candidate.
I was gonna say, because normally when it's happened, it seems like their township board normally makes some recommendations, so I'll
Yeah,
look
but-
forward to hearing more about that.
Anything else, commissioners? Just miscellaneous items. All right, if there's none, thank you all for being here. We'll start again at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We get to see lots of each other these days. Unfortunately, not in person, still at a distance. And Sarah, thanks for setting up all those calls, those Zoom calls for budget. We know that's different, and I've actually been quite pleased with how well it's worked with all of our partners coming in. That's just me personally.
Yeah, all that credit goes to Jill and Robin and Daviana and their tremendous work on getting that done. So all that credit goes there.
Great. Well, with that, we are adjourned.